지금부터
From now on, we are going to start the 2021 Smart City Living Lab Network International Forum. I am Youngtaek Oh from LH Research Institute for Land and Housing. I'm going to be your MC for the forum. This is actually the third of its kind as a part of the World Smart City Expo event. And we are here to talk about various Living Lab activities in order to promote innovation for smart city building. And we are going to listen to many experts' presentations on Living Lab. And I hope that today's discussions will pave a way for the way ahead. I understand that many of you are participating via online, so thank you very much for being with us. And also, we are observing the COVID-19 prevention guideline as well. And during the forum, please keep your mask on in case you are participating on site. Thank you. And we are going to listen to full presentations followed by panel discussion with the 6 panelists. First of all, let me invite Mr. Ho Nam-il from LH Research Institute of Land and Housing for the opening address. Good morning. Welcome to 2021 Smart City Living Lab Network International Forum. Thank you very much for participating in today's forum, both online and offline, and from both home and abroad. Today, we are going to talk about Smart City Living Lab. There are various urban issues such as housing, land usage, and mobility, and we hope to use ICT to deal with these issues. In that sense, transforming into a smart city is now a necessity to stay competitive and to stay vibrant as a city. Living Lab is about turning our actual daily life space into a kind of lab where we test various ideas for smart city. No matter how cutting edge or high-tech IT solutions are, if these solutions are not actively used by the end users, the citizens, then those technologies do not mean much. Therefore, Living Lab is an essential element to establish a smart city because it allows the citizens to actually utilize and see for themselves what these technologies can do. And now many experts are working hard to create Living Lab and to run a Living Lab. And as part of such efforts, today we invited various experts on Living Lab from both Korea and abroad. So hopefully their talks will give us a picture for a future way ahead for building and running Living Lab. Today's presenters feature Mr. Chen Yu Lee from Taipei and Ms. Kaisa Johanna, and also Ms. Eunji Kang and Mr. An Hyun as well. Thank you all very much. And we also have for our panelists Professor Lee Young-sung and Professor Kim Hwan-young and Ms. Lee Sung-hee and Mr. Park Chan-ho and Mr. Song Jong-ho, and also we have Dr. Jo Young-tae as a moderator for the panel discussion. So all these panelists are well recognized experts on smart city and the Living Lab. So I expect to hear a lot of great insights about running a Living Lab. I hope that today's international forum will give us a lot of substantial ideas as to how to build a smart city. And I hope that you will have very lively discussion. And Smart City and Living Lab, I hope them to be one step closer to our daily life. And I also want to thank all the relevant parties at the World Smart City Expo Organizing Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ho, for your opening remarks. Now, I would like to invite Jae-sun Lee, who is the president of Urban Design Institute of Korea. Honorable President Ho Nam-il of Land and Housing Institute for delivering a wonderful opening speech. And I would like to thank the organizing committee of the 2021 Smart City Living Lab Network International Forum and the participants of today's forum. World Smart City Expo is Asia Pacific's premier international event where government and private sector experts from around the world engage in talks to share the vision of happy cities of the future. I am very honored to be a part of the forum on Smart City Governance and Living Lab to deliver my congratulations. Korea, since early 21st century, has sought to transform the new cities of Dongtan, Songdo, and Sejong with ICT to solve urban problems such as transportation, crime, and energy, and has done this through smart city policies. And more recently, the private sector and the public sector have engaged in more active partnership, and there's a whole of the government effort to promote smart city. And the LH is leading the way. The Urban Design Institute of Korea has endeavored to contribute to these innovation efforts by conducting research, and we have our Smart City Research Committee dedicated to this. I hope that today will give us a great opportunity to share the experience of living labs and also ideas for smart city governance so that we can discuss ways to regenerate the cities through using the living lab concept. And I believe that the participants of today's forum will continue to contribute your efforts to the smart city policies and living lab activities. And finally, I would like to thank the organizers of the forum for keeping to the public health guidance under the pandemic situation. And I hope that the ideas that will be shared today will contribute to Korea's development of Smart City and Living Lab. Thank you very much, Mr. Jae-sun Lee. Now we are going to hear the presentations from the four presenters. The international speakers will be delivering their presentations through video. The first presenter will talk about how Taipei transferred itself as a smart city. And the presenter is Mr. Chen Yu Lee, Director of Taipei Smart City Project Management Office. So we will see the video.
Hello, good day. This is Chen Yu Lee. I'm the Director of Taipei Smart City Office. Thank you for inviting me to give a talk in this very wonderful forum. I hope you can, we can share lots of different experience of smart cities. So my topic today is how Taipei transfers itself as a smart cities. I think when we're talking about the smart cities, lots of people think that Taipei trying to build up a huge living lab for the industry and for the city government can be do all kind of the tests for the smart city solutions. But actually, that's only one of our plan, one of our action to deal with the smart cities. Before we start talking what exactly what we do in Taipei, actually we need to spend some time to discussing about the definition of the smart cities. Because everyone has their definitions, every city have their situation, their different culture, so that means they face a different problem, they deal with the different people, stakeholders. So everyone have their very, very different definition of smart cities. So what exactly the definition of a Taipei Smart City project? Personally, I think that the major concept, I think both of you, must be agreed that the core concept of smart city is to deal with the problem, to solve the problem, But the truth is, do we deal with the real problem? What exactly the real problem we face? So actually, my office started 5 years ago. In the very early 2 years, we spent lots of time to try to figure out what exactly we want to solve, what exactly the major problem of smart city, the Taipei city government. And we realized the problem is not we lack of new solutions. Actually, in Taiwan, we have tons of smart solutions. We have lots of vendors, but lots of solutions. So we don't lack of new solutions. The problem is we don't have innovation ability. We means the public sector, Taipei city government. For most of the local authorities, probably, we face the same problem. That is, we don't have a good mechanism to help us to be able to innovate it. So I think we believe that is the major problem we need to solve during the past 5 years. So I think that's why we need to build up a platform to make the private sector can be work with the public sector. Because our goal is not to build a living lab. That's what we do to solve the problem, but that's not what we want to do. We want to do, the goal of our smart city project is we want to change the culture of the city government. And, via the new culture that we make the private sector, the industry can be very easy to contribute the solution, the idea to the city government and benefit to all the citizens. So that's why our major concept is change culture. So what we do is, we base this concept. So what we do is we will do all kind of mechanisms to helping Taipei can be accept new idea, new concept, and also as the value. That's very important. I will show you later. So in the past, actually, we built up a couple mechanisms. We have a top-down mechanism. Yes, that's very traditional way to do the smart cities. It's very useful. It's very workful, but still have some problems. So we are developing a new mechanism called the bottom-up mechanism. Unlike other bottom-up mechanisms, the bottom-up mechanism we propose here is very different from others because we face the real outcome. That means we accept value. Value is the major issue of innovations. So if we don't do anything to deal with the value, that means you won't have any new mechanism. So in the past, about 5 years, we facilitated more than 200 proof of concept projects and involved more than 500 vendors. So I will show you what exactly we do this. So as I say, the problem is infrastructure, especially with Taipei. It's not solution. It's we need new mechanism, new system. So as I say, the mechanism will be the key. So what exactly we do? Before I show you the mechanism, actually, I want to show the result we have after the 5 years hard work. As you can see in this figure, this slide, the left top part There's a pie there, as you can see. Actually, in the past 5 years, in these 200 projects, only 31% of the project they were finished. That means more than half of the project they were pending in all kind of reasons. That's very important. And in this 31% of finished project, only 47%, that's less than half project, we call it a successful project. So that means only 15% of the project works. That's very reasonable numbers, because when we're talking about the innovation always comes with value. The success rate of the new idea, new solutions, always 10 to 20% more. So that is real case when we're trying to deal with the innovations. So what does that mean? That means at least 85% of projects they will fail. So the problem is, how can we deal with the fail? So our mechanism actually is very simple. What we do is we play the bridge, we play the counter window for the industry, for the private sector. So for private sector, they can propose the idea, all kind of idea to us. And we have to define the scenario. It's very important, because you need to know what you want to, what exactly you want to solve, what exactly the problem you want to solve. We don't do any, you cannot do anything but without any reason. That's really weird. So scenario is the first thing we need to figure out. And we'll negotiate with the department. And if everything works well, and we will come out with POC projects. But in this project, it's very important that we don't, it's a partnership between private and public. So that means we don't pay anyone. So that makes us can be able to accept value. We can, face the real result of the proof of concept project. And if the result is, very nice, good enough, then probably we will go for the next level. That will be pilot project, or even scale up, become a policy. So that's exactly what we do in the past. So I spent 10 minutes to describe whole the system, because that's the core concept, core value of our Smart Taipei projects, not the Living Lab. Living Lab is a method to realize this concept. So what exactly what we want to do is we want to change the culture, make the public sector, the city government can be able to accept innovation, idea, and solutions, and also accept value. So that's the key point. So based on that, we receive lots of awards. We even get a gold award, by our new solution and new systems. So, and yeah, so we receive lots of honors globally. And one of the very famous smart city expert and IoT expert, Charles Anderson, also one of my good friends. He also called Smart Taipei a game changer. That means he believes we propose a very, very different new idea and new magnet, compared to other smart city projects. And that's why we make the Taipei from, nobody knows, probably in 5 years ago. And now we actually in 2020, we ran 8th by the IMD, but it's still fine. Okay, so in the following probably 8 to 9 minutes, I will show you some of the cases we do, and also give some example of how we deal with those projects. So for the top-down part, actually, as I say, we have a couple mechanisms to helping Taipei become smart cities. One is a top-down project. But for the top-down projects, I think there's still some of the very interesting new method, new mechanism to deliver smart solutions. So I will give you just one example of what we do. That's the case we do in smart transportations. As you can see in our slide, actually in the past 5 years, we try to promote the green and sharing transportation in Taipei. For the public transportation, we have very basic public transportation, include the metro, bus, and also the biking sharing. Yeah, we already done it as 8 years ago. But, we also encourage industry to propose all kind of sharing transportations that include the motor sharing and car sharing and also parking sharing. But in here, we use the different strategy, different way to work with private sector. We don't spend lots of budget to help them to do business in Taipei because, the first priority for the transportation is still the public transportation, as I said, the metro, bus, and biking. For those nice and very great green sharing transportation, we just help them to do their business in Taipei. So that means they need to figure out their own business model in Taipei. So for example, we have a full solution here. The biking is one of the public transportation, okay? And we have a motor, car sharing, and the park sharing. But it's very interesting because for the motor sharing, we already have 3 vendors in Taipei, and also they provide, I think the latest number will be close to 10,000 scooters to the public. But for the EV, for the car sharing, we still don't have any operator right now because they cannot figure out sustainable business model. That also means they still need to figure out what's the scenario, what's the need from the citizens. So that will prevent a city or government to spend lots of budget and do nothing. Yeah, so that's very important. And I still have lots of projects, but due to the time limit, I want to go for the detail. But if you're interested with those very wonderful projects, feel free to contact me in the future. And for the bottom-up project, actually we do more than 200 projects. And as I just showed in my previous slides, only 15 of the project they worked very well. So that's But for those value project, actually we still learn a lot from it. I think that's very important. When you do the affiliate project, that's actually it's very important because you learn more than the successful one. So we accept all kind of the proposals. I will give you some of the examples. We have do lots of tests about autonomous bus. Before we know what exactly we can do with the autonomous vehicles, especially for the autonomous bus, we will keep trying. So what we do is we at least do 3 times of the tests in Taipei right now to figure out what the capability of the self-driving bus and what exactly why we need it. Can we save more money, resources, or we can, decrease the accident? We can lower the accident rate. So that's what we need to figure out. What exactly we need the autonomous bus. And also we do lots of projects to test all kind of the solution to able to detect the parking slot, empty parking slot, to provide more data, more service to our citizens. So we use the camera, use lots of sensors, magnetic sensors, and even the smart meters. Yeah, what kind of solution we can do. And of course, we do lots of environment IoT sensors to do the test. And also, we do lots of new way to saving the energies. For example, that's a case we use in our parking lot. We use new IoT devices to try to turn off the lights, but won't let the user know. And also, we do lots of tests about the robots, how robot can provide better services to our citizens. We're still trying, we still cannot figure out what exactly we can do by the robot. That makes almost all the project about the robot fail. And also, we do lots of IoT experiment platform tests, that include LoRa, Sigfox, 5G, and etc. It's very important. So, because I will give you two examples of how exactly we deal with the LoRa. About 3 years ago, we spent a lot of time to test the LoRa, and we figure out it's very interesting. We do lots of different concept projects, and one is that we checking the dimensional disease elder by the LoRa, by using the LoRa tracker. And also we do the sensor network in our reservoirs, but the result is totally different. That's very interesting because inside the urban area, the LoRa system doesn't work at all. So that's very important. That means we tell the agency of the city government, if you want to provide service in the city downtown, probably that the LoRa is not your best option. But for the reservoir, if you want to, use a very cheap way to build up the IoT network, then the LoRa probably one of the solutions that you can choose. And that exactly, the project we do in the reservoir, actually, they save lots of money from this project. And also, we do lots of different IoT project. We use in the waste management, and also for the we a new product called the iTrash solutions. Actually, there's a lot of story about the iTrash solutions, because for this case, we're not only trying to test the new solution. We also trying to because the solution we're trying to provide here actually is against to our original law. So that's very difficult. So there's a little bit sandbags during those POC projects. But there's another issue. Probably we can we can figure out next time. We can talk about that next time. And also, this is one of the cases we also work with a stock company from France, and they have done very well in to monitor the building in Paris, but they provide a solution in Taipei to detect the bridge structure, and the result is I still need to improve, but it's very good experience how to work with the foreign vendors. Okay, and also there's another case that's very, very interesting because we do AI camera monitoring in our elementary school to make sure the safety of the campus to prevent intruders. In this case, the results very, 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 very nice compared to traditional ways. And we not only scale up in Taipei, we also held the stock company to extend their solutions to other cities. For example, we also do 2 different tests in Amsterdam. Yeah, it's very interesting. The interesting part is we're using the same technology, but in Taiwan, it's more like surveillance system. But in Amsterdam, they're using to to dictate the people flow, to redesign the layout of the corner, the streets. That's very simple. Okay, so due to the time limit, I'm sorry I cannot go through all the cases. And I just want to say the concept of smart cities is very important, and we very willing to share our experience with all of you. So if you're interested with any case we do in Smart Taipei project, or even you want to want to understand more about what our making and our system, feel free to contact us. This is Chen Yuli, Director of Taipei Smart City Office. Thank you for your listening. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
예, 천유리 디렉터의
So that was a wonderful presentation from Director Chen Yu Lee. So his point that we do not actually lack smart innovation, but we lack innovation encouraging culture, and Living Lab can be a solution for that. That was impressive.
The next presentation will be delivered by Kaisa Spilling, Development Manager of Forum Virium Helsinki, and she will be presenting on co-creation at Smart Kalsatama.
Hello from Helsinki, Finland. My name is Kaisa Spilling, and I'm very happy to be here today and talk to you about how we co-create in our living lab at Smart Kalsatama. So first of all, I come from Finland, one of the Nordic countries. We are small compared to Korea, about 5 million people living in Finland. And furthermore, I come from Helsinki, and the Helsinki city has about 650,000 residents, 1.4 in the metropolitan region. The city of Helsinki has the vision to become the most functional city in the world. And our company, Forum Virium Helsinki, is the city of Helsinki's innovation company, and we want to help the city to reach their goals. So we work together with the public sector, the companies, residents, and not the least, the academia and innovation sector to co-create urban sustainable futures. Furthermore, to help the city to reach their ambitious goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2035. The city of Helsinki is growing at a fast pace, and many districts are being developed from industrial to new residential areas. The city has decided that these areas are as well used as innovation platforms for new sustainable services. One of those districts is Kalsatama, our urban lab. It's in the eastern end of the city of Helsinki, only 6 minutes from the city center by metro. Today there's about 5,000 people living in the district, and by 2040 there will be altogether 25,000. So there's a bit of construction ongoing still. The city or the district has a commercial center, and by 2040 there will be altogether 10,000 jobs. So there's a lot of players to collaborate with. So Smart Kalsatama is Helsinki's Smart City Innovation District. It is also the city's pioneer district for the carbon neutrality goals. Smart is embedded here, so we have smart energy grid. There's everything you need for smart mobility in your everyday life, and smart everyday services for the residents. We deal with how robotics could help everyday chores, and also have a digital twin that helps the urban planners to see and visualize what could be in the future before the decisions are even made. For us, smart is about co-creating value together. So we work together with the different departments of the city, with the corporate partners in the district, with the innovative startups and SMEs, and with research and innovation sector to really provide value, first of all, for the residents, and of course make those smart and sustainable services. So we invite our collaborators to our lab space, where I'm standing right now, with a dark district behind my back, actually. It's evening here in Helsinki. We also have something we call the Innovators Club, where we invite the different partners, innovators, residents, to share what's ongoing, what kind of projects are starting, where you can participate, and just to share information about 3 to 4 times a year. Then, first of all, we wanted to have something, some activities that are easily approachable. So we have piloting programs that enable different participants to collaborate with us on a faster scale. And we have a thematic roadmap that's guiding all our projects, and also have a portfolio of larger projects running in the district. Currently, like I said, there are many projects running, and actually they all advance the common vision, which is 1 more hour a day. It's a vision that works both for the citizens, meaning that every day should work so smooth that people feel that they gain 1 more hour. It's actually also a vision that also works for the companies in the district. For example, the main developer in the real estate business in the district, SRV, is even using the same slogan in their marketing. Lately, actually last year, we really wanted to approach our residents and find out how they feel about smart. So we had a designer doing a deep dive research with the local residents. I think these quotes give some understanding of the values and beliefs of how Kalsatama people feel. First of all, smart for them is a lot related to sustainability. Everything can be recycled here. It's also related to smart mobility in a way that you really don't need your own car here. Basically, there's the public transportation, there are good shared vehicle services in the district. And it's also beliefs and values about digitalization. For example, one of the quotes is, "I don't pay attention to personal data safety anymore because it's impossible to live without digital services. I think I trust too much, maybe, but still you need it." Well, we do co-create with the residents in many ways. First of all, we collect kind of thick data, like the deep dive, just to evaluate or gather baseline information. Other ways are, for example, participatory tools like gathering soft GIS data and 3D to create place-based understanding. We do host a lot of thematic co-creation workshops to develop solutions and really get the citizens' feedback at an early stage. And we, like I said, provide piloting that also brings possibilities for the residents to get involved and really to understand what could be the smart services of the future. The Innovators Club is mainly targeted for companies, the city partners, and, for example, research partners, but we do invite also residents, and sometimes there are even resident innovators that are very actively participating to our innovation activities. A great example of how piloting works in everyday life is this. A few summers ago, we had a robot bus circulating in the residential district in Kalsatama. It really brought smartness in the everyday life of the residents, but not only as a gadget, but also brought value for the residents coming from grocery shopping in the Ready Center and returning then to their homes in the residential district. So the few last meters were easy to reach with the robot bus. It was also a great way to kind of showcase smartness for the many innovation tourists visiting the district. I think it's very important to visualize and really to get the people to experience the future services in their everyday life. Well, piloting is important for the people and engaging the residents, but it's also important to have possibilities for the companies to participate. When we think about smart city development, so many times it's run by the cities and large companies. We wanted to create something also where startups and SMEs would be in the center. Agile Piloting program is really oriented for the smaller companies. It's a program for co-creation and experimentation of early prototypes in real-life environment in the district. So it's about procuring pilots, normally from 3 to 5 in a program, and then piloting them for a period of maximum 6 months. The pilots are fairly small, from 5 to 10,000 euros one. So it's a very good way to learn at a fast pace, not putting too much investment on it, and really learning together. So it really is a way for co-creating value for all the stakeholders. First of all, the startups get the market references, maybe new business cases and new networks, potential customers and partnerships. Also, the city and the corporate partners value the fact that they can also work with each other and the startups and gain new knowledge and networks. The citizens get a real grip of the new solutions and at the same time give feedback for the startups at an early phase. And for the cities, it's really like understanding about the future use cases, maybe new knowledge to support procurement of the future, or, for example, understanding on how to enable this kind of development to proceed in the city. The area works as a platform for experimentation. What we promise is provide the citizens, so we really have to see that the pilots are interesting for them. Furthermore, we can provide the infrastructure as a platform for experimentation. In the picture, there's the smart waste collection system in the district that goes underground and also brings data on what kind of waste is left in the system and at what time and by which apartment. Then there's of course the residential district, the street infrastructure, where many kinds of smart things can be experimented. The health center and, for example, the school in the district have been good collaborators for different piloting programs, and the support of the professionals have been very valuable for all companies piloting. Then when we talk about the smart district, so we really do need to talk about the data. So for example, the smart energy systems in the district give real-life data that can also be used to fuel the innovative services of the future. Agile piloting is smart in many ways. First of all, it's a good way to bring different partners around the same table. So for example, the friendly-looking robot courier was piloted last fall here in Kalsatama Ready Commercial Center, bringing groceries and meals for the residents of the local high-rise. And it brought together, first of all, the housing company developing the high-rises in the district, the Kone elevator company that provided their smart APIs that enabled then the robot to move around from the commercial center to the high-rise buildings. And of course the residents were in the core of it all. They, after all, opened their doors for the smart pilot and also, of course, made orders from the local supermarket during the piloting period. And we thought, at least in Finland, we're not used to see robots in our everyday lives, so we thought that this would be something really kind of novel. But actually, during just 1 month of piloting, so we really saw that this is really almost today. And we'll see, maybe in the near future, we'll see this kind of services functioning here in the district. And other kind of collaboration that we've been really nurturing during our past years has been collaboration with the city-owned health and well-being center in the district. There's been more than 10 pilots run together with the professionals and customers of the district, and it's a way for to gather many learnings. First of all, not only for the startups, but also for the professionals of the district to learn about new technologies and ways that they can bring to make their work more smoother. What happens then after pilots? So this is actually a good example. We had a pilot in the local schoolyard bringing a green wall that would gather rainwater, but also brought greenness in the new schoolyard, which was all grey and some kind of oasis for the children during their breaks. It also brought a way for the children to participate while planting the plants in the modular green wall element. And also it was a good way to learn about biodiversity, as the structure was attracting bees and insects. And actually the pilot grew to a project, first a small one, and now actually green infrastructure is one of our major themes on the roadmap. It's, after all, an important theme when we think about the world and the carbon neutrality targets, as well as how to really help to sustain the biodiversity in the world. There are many ways we think about how then smart can be scaled up. So one way is to think about how we can reuse the models and share the best practices. Actually, Agile piloting is one of the good examples itself, because the model has been scaled up not only in Finland nationally to the Finnish cities, but also, for example, in the Nordics, and even in our European networks, there are cities interested to trial that in their own urban development settings. Second way is to translate the results of pilots to recommendations for the city, so that the city can maybe change and develop the ways of their own procedures. And of course, pilots may scale up in other districts, in new ecosystems, or they might find new partnerships and, like said earlier, to be followed in new projects. I hope that this presentation inspired you to think about how you can co-create in your own Living Lab projects, and also what kind of smart you could experiment in your city. Thank you.
예.
Thank you very much for that presentation. The small-scale piloting program and startups' involvement were very impressive.
개발 모델이란 주제로 다크매터 랩스 아시아 강은지 이사님께서 발제를 해주시겠습니다.
Good morning all. My name is Enji Kang, a regional director of Dark Matter Labs Asia. Those who haven't heard about us, let me introduce Dark Matter Lab. Dark Matter Labs is focused on the great transition our society needs to respond to the technological revolution and the climate breakdown we face. Our aim is to discover, design, and develop institutional dark matter that support a more democratic, distributed, and sustainable future. It is increasingly clear that over the next 20 years, countries around the world faced a deep transition. We are living in a global age of long, interlinked, and emergency. The climate change, diversity loss, pandemic, antibiotic resistance, migration, and human development are some of the interconnected challenges faced by all actors in society. The dynamics and interlinked nature of this emergency will require government to become enabler for society to work together, building horizontal strategies and collaborative capabilities. Reflecting upon our most recent work in Bhutan and Philippines and India and South Korea, Dark Matter Labs will share insights gained through the co-designing transnational transition strategies with the government and international agency. The work has been collaborated with the UNDP Bhutan, investigating the challenges of youth employment and the future of work in Bhutan. The project had a clear intention. How can we build system intelligence that would allow government and societal actors to perceive the problem in their complexity? Before we get into the detail, we need to understand the context of Bhutan and how this project has been developed. Bhutan is one of the few carbon negative countries in the world, but is facing a number of challenges in designing sustainable employment market for its growing population. There is a significant youth birth, with more than half of population below the age of 27. On top of this, pandemic has impacted major industries such as hospitality and tourism, and the economic shock has hit especially young people the hardest. This demographic and economic shift demand for new market and business model, new job, reshaping older industries, and redefining the work itself in Bhutan. We often think about unemployment as a supply and demand matching problems, where solutions are typically designed in job creation or job training. But we all experience that intervening in the job market alone doesn't provide a sustainable solution. The behavior of individual and the societal and economic environments are shaped by a number of interconnected factors such as social protection, access to digital infrastructure, and social stigma of the certain profession, and more. This is how UNDP Bhutan and Dark Matter Lab found a methodology called participatory system mapping that would allow us to build an awareness of the system nature of the issue to imagine new solutions. So during the process of the mapping and synthesizing from in-depth ethnography research and research review, we try to embrace the fact that everyone within the system has a unique perspective of how that system works, how to tackle the challenges. Through mapping the connection between nodes and making sense of data, the project starts highlighting a series of the area of critical issues that contribute to the challenges of youth unemployment in Bhutan. The range is from social safety net to try unusual pathway, barrier to scale local businesses to access global trade, limited pathway to transfer the different skill and knowledge to work, and weak information flow to access equal opportunity in the job market, and also limited of the state-led model that create dependency of centralized resources, and also more than that. When you see in detail each critical area, we call it a micro insight from the system, how each node from different areas, such as a policy, regulation, and cultural norm drive a certain outcome in job market. So for example, in the middle, you can see the images, the government policies and regulations in the finance sector coupled with undertaking digital technologies within geographical constraints like mountains and lack of transportation infrastructure create high level of informal agricultural practice. Agricultural sector present over 60 of employment in Bhutan, yet it is largely informal, low productivity, and limited market linkages. This brings caution on how to address missing middle farm to support the sustainable and vibrant job for the young generation. Through the participatory mapping process, and we invited the multi-stakeholder and expert and non-expert to map their knowledges and expertise and perspective to identify the horizon of the opportunity domain, highlighting possible intervention across the whole system. Our hypothesis for creating a new environment for the future of work draw upon two learning. The first one is complex systems require multi-actor collaboration to build diverse solutions, which means the portfolio approaches enable the creation of the network of experiments for collective learning, hypothesizing, testing assumption, and validating across different contexts as an opposition of the authoritarian development model. The second one is that the change requires shifting our focus from and service and product-centered innovation to capacity, capability-centered approaches, where every actor in the system can innovate and build their solution toward long-term transition. So this is the framework for the portfolio experiment developed in order to identify investment gaps in the future of work. On the x-axis, capacities are defined according to scale, ranging from individual, collective, and to system capacity. This new framework prompts to ask what the experiment can catalyze in terms of building the capacity to innovate from within the system. Does it contribute to building individual capacity, such as a sense of agency? Does it contribute to our collective capacity of shared sense-making or decision-making? Or is it about building the mechanism at the system scale for shared understanding, shared accountability, shared data, knowledge, financial infrastructure, and metric that could help prioritize and measure the successful intervention? This perspective and question provide a glimpse into the potential of shifting system focus moving toward the future of work in Bhutan. Second case, I will introduce our most recent work with the UNDP Asia Pacific Regional Innovation Center. The guiding question for us from the beginning was this question: how can we build the transnational capacity to understand the interdependent nature of the global problem and create opportunity for shared learning between nations? Increasingly, because of the entangled nature of our world, the changing something in one place may create cascading impacts throughout the system beyond the national boundary. And the biggest problem we face, like a COVID and climate change, are problems that cannot be solved by one nation alone in isolation. So with the UNDP, we have been co-creating and designing the Transnational Governance Innovation Lab, or Transnational Lab for short. This platform aiming to bring together the actors, including various UNDP country offices and different levels of government in multiple nations, to build a shared understanding, learning, and commitment around the transnational systemic challenges of the 21st century. The program focused on 4 areas: food security, education transition, natural asset, and finally, social welfare. Since late 2020, we've been working on the topic of the food security in Philippines, and more recently with India. And we are working together with UNDP to unpack and understand the problem of the food security through a systems perspective, which inevitably goes beyond the topic of the food security to reframing the issue as a food systems issue. But we use food security as an entry point to discover the symptoms, such as why food is so unaffordable, why farmers are most food insecure group, why climate change is affecting food security, how COVID has worsened the malnutrition problem, and so on. And then we try to map out these symptoms and investigate the root causes to identify what the immediate and long-term risks are. For example, how has the pandemic generated new and immediate risk and intensify existing one? How has the biodiversity lost and climate change generated long-term risk and vulnerability? So ultimately, we will use this information to build a portfolio of option and intervention that center around the governance innovation that can be relevant for both Philippines and India and other countries like South Korea, which has a similar issue or challenges are faced. So here's the next couple of slides. I would like to introduce some of the key processes that we went through to build up collective intelligence and shared understanding. One of the first things we did together was carrying out a small internal research, which resulted in this map, which is a snapshot of the food system in Philippines, tracking the input of production, such as land, water, energy, and labor, and then the quantity of the consumption, also including how much food is imported. And then lately, the output, which include emission and waste, but also economic output and nutrition. It represents the linear structure of the food supply chain, tracking the individual food product, how it moves throughout the system. Because by visualizing the flow, it gives us a little better picture of where the problems are located and where the bottlenecks are, and so on. And also it prompts you to imagine how can we make this circular rather than linear. And then we engaged the broader relevant UN agency who could provide valuable knowledge. So we coordinated a virtual workshop to bring everyone together and collectively cross-validate the map and data through taking governance angle, how we can intervene in the transforming the food system. This is the system map, which map the food system risk in Philippines from short-term and immediate risk posed by COVID to more long-term and persistent risk, and how they are interconnected with what we consider, and those are mostly the considered beyond the field of food system, such as human development and environmental and political and geopolitical risk. This is still ongoing, the project. At the moment, we are working on coordinating learning between the two national contexts. For instance, in India, we have recently done some virtual interview with experts in agricultural technology and started exploring the various use cases in data-driven agriculture. We found that India, especially, they are quite ahead in terms of experimenting with emerging technologies, such as using AI for the pest detection, using blockchain for tracking the fake seed, or IoT for micro irrigation, and also many more. On the other hand, the Philippines, we have very up-to-date research on the COVID impact on food system and its actors. We acknowledge that not only the data are available in all the countries, and the context is very, very different. So we are not the mainly using these data for the pure comparison, but rather we are pulling together intelligence from different countries to fill in the gap in our understanding. And also by coordinating flow of knowledge between these regional neighbors, we are trying to build a more complex picture of the reality and explore what is really possible. The next step for the transnational lab is toward what we call deep code innovation. It's a transformation that focuses on recreating the underlying structure required to make the transition. The governance mechanism involving the new kind of decision-making processes, organizational structures, the mechanism to ensure accountability and feedback loop, transparency, knowledge flow will be part of deep code innovation. And the transnational lab will include developing the idea into experiment, prototyping, and testing them. So this is the last example. In this part, I will introduce our past work on designing a platform for young people in Asia, especially focus on democratizing the capacity to imagine, to create long-term futures beyond the generations and national boundary. The work that was in collaboration with the Seoul Youth Hub and Seoul Metropolitan Government in designing a problem-solving community of young people. The initiative tested the platform function by facilitating two cohorts of Asia young activist researchers from over 20 countries last year to build bold future provocation to tackle urban problem in Asia. So as you know, the youth has been one of the biggest subjects. The Asia Pacific region is home for 60% of world 15 to 24 years old age. However, less than 2% of world parliamentarians are youth. This means young people account for almost like more than half of the world population, but there is no political representative representing them. So while experiencing the new form of social, economic, and cultural challenges in Asia, now more than ever, we need the ability to respond to what is happening in community, society, and even the world around us, in order to act for ourselves beyond the frame of the youth problem or generational or regional boundaries. We met young people who are facing to solve the social problem in a different ways of building new form of solidarity, such as Friday for Future, the Umbrella Revolution led by the Hong Kong the youth, Taiwan's Sunflower Movement, and Myanmar's youth protest in May and June. Beyond the discourse of young people as a future worker or new consumer, even entrepreneur, the program the attempt to perceive the youth as a self-sovereign individual who can play an important role to realize the potential of the futures, challenging existing social norm of the short-term zero-sum game in bounded system. In this context, young people explore new challenges that Asia is facing, several areas of investigation such as youth and editable economy, ecological disruption, civic engagement and democracy, digital sovereignty, social isolation and loneliness, borders and digital ID, and right to the cities. These are introduced under the open investigation methodology, which explore the structural root cause of the challenges. This is the last slide. So we are in the second year of the IoT platform program. Since its launch, still there are few questions remaining to address. The in-house team is hoping that the IoT platform become a new pathway for young people to collaborate and share and learn from their peer, ultimately leading to individual and societal challenges. Along with this, Seoul City is testing and developing open digital asset and knowledge infrastructure toward institutional platform design, which can grow and achieve new form of solution beyond the border and boundary of the rights and rules. These are some of the questions we try to improve. What if every actor in the system is able to learn, understand the challenges, and innovate their own solution? What would be the aggregated compound effect and collective capacity generated at the system scale? What would be the scalable digital and cultural infrastructure for this system transition? So these are all from me, and thank you so much.
예, 전환 및 새로운
Thank you very much for your presentation on transitions and new models of development. So young people are now faced with the new types of challenges. So young people need to take a more active role in finding solutions.
이제는 스마트
Our last presentation for today is titled The Current Status of Korean Smart City Living Labs and Way Forward. Ms. An-hyun will deliver the presentation. Good morning and good afternoon. I am An-hyun and I'm from Land and Housing Institute. I would like to talk about the status of Korean Smart City Living Labs and our way forward. Living labs were discussed since mid-2000 and it was launched in Europe and has been spreading across the world. And in Korea, a lot of discussion has taken place and the relevant laws have been developed. And the research that I'm going to talk about will feature an analysis of the smart city living labs by who's driving them, what the focal areas are, and what the developmental phases are, and also the sustainability of the activity. Now, the methodology of the research, we wanted to build a database of the smart city living labs, and we looked at the statistics in order to understand the current development of living labs and the current practices of living lab in Korea. And the living lab, as we defined it, is the city space serving as a platform for demonstrating the benefits of smart city and involving different stakeholders. We have conducted literature review, and since 2011, a lot of research on living labs were conducted in Korea. Mostly these research focused on defining a living lab and looking at the different categories of living lab. And also, we have research that has looked at the network, framework, and governance of living labs. In other countries, we have seen that thematic living lab networks have been quite strong, and the private sector has gotten involved very much. In Korea, it was in 2013 when Living Lab was first launched, and so we are still in the initial stages. So now I would like to talk about the actual findings from the analysis. In order to conduct the analysis, we created a standard template for building a Smart City Living Lab database and reflected this in the categorization. And we have looked at the Smart City Living Labs by who's driving it, what are the focal areas, the developmental phases, and the sustainability of the activities. And the drivers of Living Lab we looked at were central government, local government, public sectors, public entities, the university, and CSOs. And we have referenced the Amsterdam Smart City categorization and also ENOL categorization of living labs, but we included transportation and safety and disaster, which is an important aspect that living labs in Korea are dealing with. And we also looked at whether the living labs are just one-off activity or continuous, and we have categorized them accordingly. And we looked at who's driving each of the living labs. We found that in Korea, as much as 73% of the living labs are actually driven by the central and local governments. And a lot of these living labs are beneficial in the sense that an integrated approach can be taken for improving legislations and achieving standardization, but public sector-led living labs tend to lack active participation by the citizens. So this is a comparison of Korea and cases in other countries. In the case of Amsterdam Smart City, there are about 350 living labs, and more than 50 are actually private sector led. In the case of Korea, 73% of the living labs are driven by public entities. In the case of ASC, only 14.2% of the living labs are driven by government entities. Now about the focal areas. The key area for living lab activity in Korea was to improve the living environment, followed by transportation and safety and disaster. And energy and resource recycling were not as actively pursued by Korean living labs. Now, if we compare Korea with ASC, as you can see from the bar graph here, the living environment and transportation were the major themes that living labs in Korea dealt with. But in the case of ASC, recycling and energy were the more dominant themes. Now, the living lab development phases can be divided into defining the problem, ideation, piloting, POC and evaluation, redesigning, and scale up. And we can see that in Korea, 21% of the living labs had actually gone up to the scale up stage. And the central government and local government-led living labs are generally less successful in going all the way to the scale up. And for the university and CSO-led living labs, they were more likely to develop all the way to the scale-up phase. And sustained activity, 69% of the living lab activities in Korea were just one-off, and only 31% were continued. In the case of the central government, local government, there was a 90% and 76% respectively of living labs that were just engaged in one-off activities. In Korea, most of the living labs were driven by the central and local governments, and we need to activate living lab participation by engaging private sector more, and we need to foster a local partnership framework supported by different organizations with relevant expertise. And we need to have a nationwide living lab network. The existing Korean living labs have been conducting their activities in relative isolation, so we need to help them connect with each other and share information by building a nationwide living lab network. And we need to have organized monitoring and efficient performance evaluation so that we can improve our living lab activities. And also, we will see more convergence of themes being dealt by living labs. And we also see inclusiveness and sustainability becoming very, very important themes for living lab practices. And due to the COVID-19, remote platforms are becoming more active when it comes to the living lab. In the past, these types of online living lab platforms were very limited in their activities, but due to the pandemic, more opportunities and potential for activating these online living lab platforms have emerged. And we need to promote the sustainability of the living labs by fostering public-private partnership-based business model, and we need to have more sustainable budget available, and we need to have living lab network to continue to build a database and share experience, and we need to have more organized capacity strengthening programs, and we need to have platform-type living lab. Now, this concludes my presentation on the status of living labs in Korea and the way forward. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. An, for your presentation. We were able to understand the current status of living labs in Korea, and I think the takeaway for me was to build a living lab network to help the living labs connect and share information with each other. So all 4 presentations have been delivered, and we are going to reset the stage a bit and then begin the panel discussion. So I would like to ask the panelists to come up to the stage. We are going to begin the panel discussion on smart city governance and promotion of living lab activities. We have many panelists, so I'd like to introduce them. Today, this session will be moderated by Mr. Cho Young-tae, who's a senior research fellow at LH Institute. Thank you very much. And next, we have with us Professor Young-sung Lee from Seoul National University. And from Hanyang University, we have Professor Hwan-Young Kim. And from Team Interface, we have CEO Sung-hae Lee. And from Cheongdo UIT, we have Mr. Chan-ho Park, who is a director at the Cheongdo UIT. Finally, we have with us Mr. Jong-ho Song from the LH Smart City Development Office. So Dr. Cho will moderate. Thank you very much. I heard the presentation with great interest. I found new insights and new examples, and there were presentations that gave me ideas for developing the smart city and the living labs in a more forward-looking way. Now we have 5 panelists with me on stage. I'm the moderator, and I will give my 5 panelists time to share their ideas. So we have about 25 minutes. So this is the order in which we're going to proceed. First, irrespective of where we're sitting, I would like to ask Ms. Sung-hae Lee to deliver her comments. Sung-hae Lee has been conducting a lot of design thinking projects and living lab projects. And she was involved in living lab and design thinking activities in Gangnam and also Sihung City. And I think she can enlighten us about the differences between the design thinking approach and the living lab. Hello, I am Sung-hae Lee of Team Interface. Currently, there are many smart city projects in which citizens are engaged, and I'm involved in a lot of them. And I have been involved in different approaches of living lab projects, and there was a lot that I took away from such experiences. For example, Sihung City's Smart City Living Lab was focused on demonstrating the potential for smart city, and it's been active since 3 years. And when we first got into the project, a governance structure was created. There was the civic participation committee, and there were also NGOs and CSOs that got involved. So we set the basic infrastructure for carrying out living lab activities. Actually, there are more than 50 countries in Sihung City that are involved in smart city efforts. And so we wanted to make sure that these companies partner well while allowing for participation by the citizens of Sihung City. And also, in the case of Gangnam District in Seoul, the smart city policies are being co-created by the public officials in concert with the citizens of Gangnam District. And as was mentioned previously, I have been active in design thinking projects as well. So I sought to integrate the design thinking approach in these living lab activities. And towards the public sector, I was involved in persuading why citizen involvement is very critical. And also, I've been speaking with the citizen participants to talk about what they can bring to the table. In the case of Magok district in Seoul, my company got involved in the Smart City Living Lab activities there. We have been involved in prototyping for technologies, and we have engaged the citizens in that early process of prototyping. And as Dr. An Hyun mentioned, the Korean smart city living labs are just emerging, really. And citizens are both clients and also co-creators and becoming more and more important. And the smart city companies need to really understand the importance of citizen participation. And design thinking approach is to take different perspectives on an issue, and also it involves co-creation. And so we don't want citizens to feel like they are overwhelmed by the difficulties or complexities of the technology, but I use design thinking approach and co-creation approach to help citizens feel like they can add value to these activities. So to what extent should citizens get involved? And I think this might be a question for companies and governments. They probably are, they also want to know. And so, and I am very much hoping that depending on the phase at which the living lab is, the extent of participation by citizens can vary. In some cases, citizens could participate from the very early stage of identifying the issues to solve and developing ideas to solve it, but we rarely see such examples in Korean living labs. Oftentimes it is the companies that bring the technological solutions, and then the citizens get involved to give feedback. And I think the ideal situation is when citizens participate of their own volition. And so I think perhaps incentives could also be provided for encouraging citizens to participate. So there are different approaches to engage citizens, and I think the local governments and companies should try to consider all these different approaches and ideas of engaging citizens so they can have a very successful living lab project.
네.
Yes, so she is part of the current Fourth Industrial Revolution Committee. So she shared with us her experience based on that. There are not that many companies who are working solely in the smart city space, but I hope that you can make more contributions. Now, let me invite Mr. Chano Park. Mr. Park has been working in urban planning in Korea for a long time. So he's applied smart city living lab ideas a lot. So I hope you can share with us a lot of your experiences, and I really hope to hear your feedback, even if your feedback might be painful at first. Hello, I'm Chano Park. So I attended other seminar yesterday, and now and from my conference participation yesterday, one moderator mentioned that it's really feels like sitting in a hot seat when you are on the stage, and now I'm in that hot seat. But still, it was wonderful to listen to all the great presentations. So I want to thank all the organizers and also the presenters as well. So if I can share my experience, my company has been working in the smart city space. We've conducted conducted a lot of smart city related projects, including a living lab as well. So we have experiences of building a plan for a living lab and establishing it and running it. Because of that, we are in a kind of frontline position where we can directly listen to citizens. And when citizens give us ideas as to how they perceive urban problems, it's really wonderful, because when citizens give us feedback, they are very specific. They talk about really specific issues in really specific terms. So it actually gives us ideas to work on. And also when we go about building smart city plans, or when we try to come up with a regenerative urban development plans, we always need to think about a service component. So I think that we might need to have an expert on urban services as well. So we form a citizen participation group. So in this group, citizens can come and participate, and based on their feedback, we select the services to provide, and then based on these selected services, we run a living lab. And so for us, smart city and living lab are together. They're interconnected. So living lab is a part of building a smart city. Some people say that that's not the case. That some people say that living lab is separate from smart city. But here, in Korea, when we are still at the early stage of building a smart city, I think that we can definitely try different types of living labs. So many local governments are implementing a living lab idea. So what I see is that the word living lab sounds really good, but it's not possible for every local government in Korea to implement a living lab. What I mean by this is that local governments within the Seoul metropolitan area, or in some cities nearby Seoul, the local governments in these locations, they've already done living labs a lot. So they already know what living lab is about, and they already have experiences of building and running living lab. They are already moving to the next phase where they want to improve upon the existing living lab. But if you go outside this whole metropolitan area, a lot of local governments, they don't even understand the concept of a living lab. So when I go out and meet with them, I can see that they have very low level of understanding about the concept, and they're also very shy people. They're very shy, and they're not proactive in expressing themselves, and they're very passive. So based on my experiences, if I can share what we can do to further develop the living lab situation in Korea, I have 3 major points. Most importantly, I think, so the living lab should not be approached as just a one-off event. I think that kind of approach needs to be avoided. So not just for smart city, but a living lab is a really essential component, and living lab is just something we need to do to improve our living environment. But in Korea, a living lab is often pursued and led by public government, local government. So I hope that more leadership role can be taken by the private sector. It means private sector needs to be allowed to take more leadership, I hope. And also many citizens, if you look at citizens in small and medium-sized cities outside Seoul, they are not used to expressing themselves. They're not used to voicing their opinions. So we need to encourage them to speak up. I think that needs to be the basis. And irrespective of whether it's in Seoul or outside Seoul, usually people of older age, people who are used to living in their neighborhood for a long period of time, once again, these types of people, they are not proactive in voicing their expressions. So when we go out and provide urban regenerative training programs, those really local residents and older residents who've been living in the area for a long time, they are very silent. They used to be silent. So we need to find a way to communicate with them, and also we need to find a way to include them in these efforts. And third point, we need to think about the composition of a living lab, and we need to have the right facilitator to run the living lab. So once again, I mentioned about this challenge in terms of communicating with the local citizens and the local government officers. So for effective running of a living lab, I think it's an ideal to invite the local residents to participate in running the living lab. So and also to do that, we need to have the citizens to be open-minded about the living lab. And as we heard about the Helsinki situation, we need to also think about innovation culture. As the previous speaker mentioned about more innovation-friendly culture, we also need to talk about that. So perhaps we need to have some sort of platform for citizens to come in and express themselves. So we need to have participation both from the government, local government, and also from citizens themselves. And also we need participation from private sector companies as well, either online and offline. We need to have an open platform where all parties can freely join and share their ideas and express themselves. As we saw in the case of Amsterdam.com, city.com, so usually at the early stage, maybe an online platform might be easier to build and manage. But as we saw in the case of Helsinki, we definitely need to have a very open living lab platform, either online and offline. And if we can take it further for the next step, then we need to have some kind of forum where citizens can see for themselves where the problems that they are faced with in their local neighborhoods, whether these problems are truly locally unique or whether these problems are common between different localities as well. So we need to have that kind of platform that allows citizens to compare the local problems so that they can have a broader view. So that can also facilitate citizens' participation. Thank you very much for your many ideas. Thank you very much.
다음은
Next, I would like to ask Mr. Chung Ho Song of LH Smart City Development Office. LH has been instrumental in leading the U-City in Dongtan, and also it has entered into the Smart City project, which is the third phase of these city developments. So what kind of living lab activities is LH involved, and what are your future plans? I got a lot of takeaways from the comments and the presentations that were delivered today. LH was founded almost 70 years ago, and most of the cities in Korea were, planned by LH, and we were often criticized in the process. People have criticized us for creating supplier-driven cities, supplier-oriented cities. Of course, we have utilized UCP and MP and different approaches in order to make our city development more customer-centric. And today I realize that living lab concept is very close to the customers' needs, our citizens' needs. And so I would like to ask the participants here for your support in helping us learning more about the Living Lab activities. Of course, we are in our own small way involved in the Living Lab activities. Since 2018, in Sejong City, we introduced a Living Lab. Sejong City is relatively large in size. And so there are certain residential areas where people have already moved in, but then there are other areas where residential buildings are being constructed. And so initially, we created a citizen participation group, and we engaged with these groups to test and get feedback on different solutions. Although we did not agree on a particular solution on the issues that we had tabled, but we nevertheless learned a lot of lessons along the way. Now, Dongtan City is another city that we are involved in. So we took a similar approach as we did with Sejong City, but in a more diverse way. So instead of trying to put up tenders for potential vendors to submit their quotes and sign contracts, we have taken different approach to engage our private sector, and we want to introduce the Living Lab concept in a more broad-based way going forward. As you know, there is Phase 3 New Cities program. Of course, there are other city development programs, but this third phase, city development, is the major one. And based on our experience in Dongtan and Sejong, oftentimes we had been looking at the plans, and after the plans are complete, provide feedback and try to revise things. But I think we could perhaps utilize the Living Labs and get the Living Labs involved in the very, very early stage of urban planning, and also do so in a way that is not just one-off, so that the Living Lab can continuously be in operation to provide feedback and input that can help an ongoing evolution of the cities that are being developed. And in that sense, I think we will need a lot of help from our panelists here, so I would like to ask for your support. Thank you. The third phase city development program has the slogan of a city of coexistence. And I think Mr. Song was saying that the Living Lab concept will be developed to achieve that vision.
Next panelist is Professor Hwan-Young Kim from Hanyang University. So, how to utilize big data in an urban city, in a smart city, and what kind of civic participation will be effective in a big data-based smart city? Professor Kim? Hello, I am Hwan-Young Kim from Hanyang University. I teach architecture. Thank you very much for inviting me as a panelist. And I listened to many great presentations and great comments from my fellow panelists. I have 3 points that I want to share. I do a lot of data analysis, so I'm interested in how to utilize data coming from Living Lab. So my comments will be about that. And first of all, in my view, a Living Lab the platform itself is very useful, I think. So because first of all, it's useful in a way that when we often talk about urban planning in modern time, we often talked about civic participation in terms of decision making for urban planning and development. So we often talk about top-down and bottom-up approach. There are different mechanisms to allow civic participation, and recently it seems it kind of culminated into this living lab space, this living lab platform. So I think it's as an instrument, it is a very good instrument, but I hope to see more direct application of civic participation. So what I'm saying here is that Living Lab is really important in terms of encouraging civic participation. If you look at cases like Milton Keynes or London City, before they built a smart city, they built a smart data hub. So based on the smart data hub, they were able to collect and analyze data from their city, and then based on the analyzed data, they were able to provide better services to their citizens. So here, building a smart data hub is also an important step, and that data hub needs to be maintained even after smart city is built, so that the data utilization can keep going. And now if you look at our Korea situation, I also work actively in the space of digital twins. So digital twins, we have no problem in building digital twins in Korea because we have enough technology. But the issue is what kind of content will be incorporated into digital twins and how we are going to utilize digital twins. There are a lot of data being generated from a living lab. If we embed such data into a digital twin, that can be a really great connection, I think. And my second point is, so we try a lot of experiments and tests on living lab. That's why we build a living lab. A living lab is a great platform to test new policies and new technologies. Yes, I agree on that. And urban issues are very complex and multi-dimensional. So when we try some physical solution, once we apply a physical solution, or once we apply a solution physically, it is not easy to do course correction when there are some problems occurring at the later stage. So that way, a living lab can be a really useful tool to try out new solutions at small scale. And also, it is a great venue for citizens to come in and voice their opinions. Citizens do not have much platform to express themselves. Given that a living lab is, I think, a really great venue for citizens to do that, and also a living lab, if we keep collecting data and collect people's opinions, it's not optional anymore, I think. Living lab is not optional anymore, even though living lab is still at a very early stage in Korea. Once we move past towards a mid-level of running a living lab, we would have accumulated a certain amount of data and people's opinions. So at that stage, we need to think about how to utilize it. And my next point, so in terms of building a smart city, in my view, when we look at smart city in Korea, we kind of perceive a smart city as a kind of product. But product kind of has the connotation of a finished outcome. I don't think that's the right way of understanding smart city. It needs to be a more organic and more continuous concept. If we understand smart city as a digital twin of an actual city, then smart city is not a finished outcome. It's not going to be static once it's complete. It needs to be more active, and the digital twin of a city based on big data of that city needs to be constantly monitored and maintained and actively utilized. When that happens, we also need to think about policy framework and processes to maintain smart city as smart. Thank you very much for your feedback. You talked about utilizing a living lab as part of a building process for a smart city. We also talked about how to utilize data, and you also suggested utilizing a digital twin in living lab. When we were actually having a discussion with the other agencies, we talked about metaverse. And we believe that a metaverse can build into the digital twin. And in the metaverse, citizens can have their own avatar and participate in the metaverse as avatar. So that way, maybe a metaverse can be a kind of earlier version of smart city, so to speak. In Finland, they used to talk about building a ubiquitous living area. But I think the metaverse or living lab that we have is even further, one step ahead of the Finland idea.
부탁을 드릴 텐데.
Now I would like to ask Professor Young-Sung Lee to deliver his comments. He has about 7 minutes. He has done a lot of research with LH Smart City Institute. Originally, I asked him to talk about the examples of Korean smart city living labs that are successful. But I think there is also another important issue of getting citizen participation. And so I would like to ask him to also comment on that, since he's from the university and he's teaching a lot of students who may get involved in these kind of activities. Thank you very much. As Dr. Cho mentioned, Seoul National University has done a joint research with LH Institute last year. And actually, the case example presented today, the Kalsatama and also from Taiwan, these examples were supposed to be presented last year at the World Smart City Expo, but because the event was canceled, we were not able to share them then. And we have done follow-up research, and so I'd like to make a couple of comments based on that research. I would like to say 3 things. First, we need to develop living labs in different ways based on the type of living lab that is being promoted. And also, secondly, we want to have a better management of living labs. And thirdly, we need to promote a network of smart city living labs. Now, as Ms. Sung-Hae Lee mentioned, there are different types of living labs. But although they're different, there are certain categorizations that can be made. There are living labs that are focused on identifying the needs of the citizens. And the living labs in Korea are primarily focused on identifying citizen needs and problems to solve. And the second type of living lab is similar to Kalsatama. There is private sector involvement to check whether the technological solution is actually feasible, and also further do research and development of the technological solutions. And thirdly, it's a POC type of a living lab. And this example is seen in Taiwan. And so there are certain concepts that cannot be understood just based on data. So there needs to be certain living experience that will help determine whether it's feasible or not. And waste management systems that can be automated. And I actually proposed the smart waste management idea to Busan City. And the whole idea is to have citizens throw away their waste in the machine so that the machine can automatically keep track of how much waste has come in. And then on demand, the waste truck can come. But the personnel I talked about this idea with said that oftentimes the citizens do not properly dump their waste within the machine, so it's not going to work. So there are issues that require human solutions and not necessarily technological solutions. And also, I'd like to also touch upon living labs that are focused on conflict resolution. And one of the panelists mentioned that living labs could be very different and the phases or the duration of the living lab activities might vary. And I completely agree. Depending on what type of living lab and what the purpose of the living lab is, we could have different plans and organization and duration of living lab activities. And also, I think it is very important to get living labs connected with top management. By that, I mean that while we also have bottom-up approach of people voicing their needs, but for this to be effective, there needs to be an effective governance structure. For example, if there's an electricity project, there are electricity producers and the electricity users. And if EVs need to be supported, you need to have chargers. And there are different services that may be driven by electricity use. So then you would have to take into account all the different stakeholders who are using and producing this power. And for this to be effective, and for this to get the buy-in from the top management, you need to be able to prove that this is actually profitable and sustainable, and that there can be certain cash flow that can be generated. And so this is very important. And so citizens may provide some input or provide data or other information that can help improve this power usage, then maybe we could provide some sort of remuneration to further incentivize meaningful input. So these types of models can be quite effective in enhancing the capacity of the citizens to participate. And also, finally, I'd like to say that we need to establish a network of smart city living labs. Living labs generate data, and the data generated by Korean living labs are often very shallow, very light, and the data variation is very limited. And in order to compensate for this, we need to have the living labs data connected across a network. So we need to have a system or a network to connect the data. And in order to do this, we need to determine what living labs will get involved in this network, what type of data will be shared, and who's going to manage the data, and what kind of economic incentives we will provide to the providers of data. And with regards to development of human resources and experts, well, when we launch living lab activities at Seoul National University, students could be invited to participate, sometimes become, participates in various tests, and I think that kind of experience will help them become living lab experts going forward. So Professor Lee talked about the different types of living labs that can be developed, and also he suggested that we create a network for better knowledge and data sharing amongst living labs. So we heard 4 presentations today, and we also listened to the panelists' comments. We are in the process of incorporating the living lab activities into the process of urban planning, although it's at a very initial stage and we need to really develop our ways going forward. And there are certain concerns about doing this. But as we have seen in other cases across the world, this is something that is worth taking the risk and worth trying. I would like to thank the presenters and the panelists for joining us today, and I hope that all of us could join in this effort in a more sustained way. With this, I would like to conclude the panel discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have heard all of the 4 presentations, and also we have participated in the panel discussion. We will come up with other very interesting topics for next year's forum. At the 2022 forum, I hope we could meet without the masks. And with that hope, I would like to conclude today's forum. Thank you very much.